Hello, my dear friends. You're standing on the edge of what looks like the end of the world, a man-made sea so vast its far shore dissolves into the hazy heat of the Cambodian jungle. The water is a perfect mirror, a sheet of hammered silver reflecting the colossal towers of a temple and the infinite blue of the sky. It is a vision of divine order, of humanity taming nature itself. You feel an almost primal urge to cup your hands and drink from this pristine, sacred pool. And let's be honest, in the crushing, tropical humidity, you probably wouldn't survive the night if you did. The water that looks like a gift from the gods is, in reality, a teeming, microscopic world of things that would see your digestive system as a welcoming new home. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let that image of a shimmering, deceptive paradise settle in your mind. Picture the weight of the air, thick with the scent of damp earth and unseen blossoms. Feel the sun on your skin. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your feet sink slightly into the damp, red earth at the edge of the great reservoir, what the Khmer called a baray. This isn't just a pond, it's an act of will. You are looking at the West Baray at anchor, a perfectly rectangular body of water 5 miles long and 1.5 miles wide. It is so enormous, so geometrically perfect, that it feels less like a human creation and more like a feature of the planet, laid down by a deity with a celestial ruler. In the center, almost floating on the surface, is a small island with a temple, the West Mebon, a sanctuary accessible only by boat, a jewel box in the middle of this liquid mirror. This is the grand illusion of the Khmer Empire, the foundational promise made by its god kings. They didn't just rule people, they commanded the very elements. This vast expanse of water was their public statement, a symbol that they could capture the rains from heaven, store them and release them to create life-giving rice, the true currency of the empire. This water was a reflection of the heavens, a tamed piece of the cosmic ocean, a guarantee of stability and prosperity in a world governed by the chaotic cycle of monsoon and drought. From a distance, it is breathtaking. It is the image of perfection, of a society in complete harmony with its environment, ruled by a leader who is truly divine. But now, take a few steps closer. Let your gaze drop from the horizon to the water lapping just inches from your feet. The illusion shatters. The perfect silver mirror dissolves into a murky, greenish-brown soup. A shimmering film of algae coats the surface, swirling in lazy patterns. The air here doesn't smell of pure, clean water. It carries a different scent, a thick, sweetish odor of decay, of mud and rotting vegetation, the smell of life and death mingling in the warm, stagnant liquid. You see the constant, frantic dance of insects on the surface. Water striders skate across the algae film, and just below, you can imagine the wriggling larvae of 1 billion mosquitoes. This is the shocking reality of the sacred pools. They weren't filtered, chlorinated resort swimming pools. They were colossal, slow-moving ponds in the middle of a sweltering jungle, adjacent to a city of nearly 1 million people. Every day, the runoff from the city, with all its human and animal waste, would find its way here. It was the perfect, warm, nutrient-rich incubator for bacteria, for parasites, for the snails that carry schistosomiasis, and for the Anopheles mosquitoes that spread malaria. This water, the source of the empire's life, was also a relentless, silent source of its fevers, its dysentery, its plagues. So why? Why would a civilization capable of such incredible engineering, of building stone temples that map the constellations, create a system that was so obviously a public health disaster? The answer lies in a completely different way of seeing the world. For the Khmer, the concept of purity was not biological, it was spiritual. They didn't have germ theory. Sickness wasn't caused by tiny invisible creatures in the water, it was caused by displeased spirits, bad karma, or an imbalance in the body's elemental humors. The baray's function wasn't to provide sterile drinking water, but to fulfill a much grander purpose. It was, first and foremost, a colossal machine for irrigation, the heart of a hydraulic system that allowed for up to 3 rice harvests a year, feeding a massive population and fueling the construction of the temples. The king who could achieve this wasn't just an administrator, he was demonstrating his divine connection to the gods, his mastery over the forces of nature. The baray was a symbolic recreation of the Hindu Sea of Milk, the cosmic ocean from which the world was born. Its sacredness was in its symbolism and its agricultural power, not its potability. The glittering surface reflecting the sky was proof of the king's divine mandate. What teemed unseen beneath that surface was simply part of the messy, organic reality of the world, a problem to be dealt with by priests and healers, not engineers. The damp earth beneath your feet, a mixture of clay and grit, is saturated with this potent, life-giving, and dangerous water. It is the very same earth, mixed into a slurry, that will bind the stones of the temples and the same fine dust that will coat the hands and faces of the men who carve them. That fine, gritty dust we spoke of now coats your skin. You have stepped from the edge of the Great Barrier and into the heart of the sacred city, moving through the shaded, cool corridors of a temple gallery. The air here should feel still and reverent, but today it is alive with a fine, floating haze of stone particles, each one catching the slanted beams of sunlight like a galaxy of tiny stars. You run your hand along a finished section of the wall. The sandstone is impossibly smooth, cool to the touch. Before you, a story unfolds in a silent, epic panorama. Gods and demons, locked in an eternal struggle, pull on the body of a giant serpent, churning the cosmic ocean to release the elixir of immortality. Their faces are models of serene determination or fierce, stylized rage. Celestial dancers, the apsaras, arch their backs in poses of impossible grace, their fingers delicately curved, a faint, stony smile on their lips. The illusion is one of divine effortlessness. It feels as if the gods themselves commanded the stone to take these shapes, as if the images were not carved from the stone, but were always waiting within it, needing only a gentle touch to be revealed. These galleries whisper tales of heavenly battles and divine order, a permanent testament to the glory of the king and his celestial patrons. It is a silent, perfect, eternal world. But now, turn your head. Just a few feet away, the illusion of silence and effortless creation is violently torn apart. Here, the wall is a coarse, pockmarked surface of raw sandstone. The air is not still, it shudders with the percussive, high-pitched chink-chink-chink of hundreds of iron chisels. The sound is not a whisper, it's an industrial roar, a relentless chorus of metal on rock that scrapes at your nerves and sets your teeth on edge. You see the men, the artisans. They are not serene figures. They are wiry, muscular men, their skin slick with sweat that has turned the floating dust into a paste, streaking their faces and chests with lines of grey mud. They wear simple loincloths, their bodies exposed to the constant abrasion of stone chips and dust. Look at their hands. They are not the delicate instruments of a divine artist, they are the gnarled, calloused, and bleeding tools of a labourer. The man closest to you is working on the face of an apsara. With every tap of his wooden mallet on the end of his chisel, a small puff of dust explodes into the air, right in front of his face. He breathes it in. He has been breathing it in all day, every day, for years. This is the shocking, gritty reality behind the serene stone faces. The dust isn't just an inconvenience. It's a killer. The fine sandstone of Angkor is rich in silica. As the men chip away, they aerosolize microscopic, crystalline particles of it. When you breathe this in, it's not like breathing in harmless household dust. These tiny, sharp-edged particles travel deep into the lungs, where the body's immune system tries to attack and engulf them. But the silica cannot be broken down. Instead, it triggers a constant state of inflammation, leading to the formation of scar tissue, hard nodules that slowly, relentlessly replace the soft, flexible tissue of the lungs. This is silicosis, the stone cutter's disease. It is a slow, creeping form of suffocation. The artisan's chest would tighten over the years. A dry, hacking cough would become his constant companion. He would find it harder and harder to draw a full breath, as if his own lungs were turning to stone, mirroring the material he worked with every day. The very act of carving these images of an eternal, heavenly realm was ensuring his own life would be painfully shortened. The serene smile he is carving onto the apsara's face is a cruel mockery of the agony building within his own chest. So why endure this? Why would generations of men sacrifice their health to create these carvings? Again, it comes down to a worldview where the physical and the spiritual are deeply intertwined. This wasn't just a construction project. It was a mass act of devotion. Each tap of the chisel was a prayer. The artisans were not merely decorating a building, they were recreating the heavens on earth, manifesting the sacred stories of their faith in a tangible, permanent form. This work generated punya, or spiritual merit, which was believed to ensure a more favourable rebirth in the next life. The suffering of the body, the bleeding hands, the aching back, the dust-filled lungs was part of the offering. It was a sacrifice that purified the soul. For the king, these vast, detailed reliefs were essential propaganda, a visual narrative that cemented his legitimacy as a divine ruler, a mortal man in communion with the gods. For the carver, it was a path to salvation. The beauty and permanence of the finished wall, which would stand for 1,000 years, far outweighed the transient suffering of his own mortal body. As you watch him work, you notice the panel his carving depicts a great royal procession, with the king carried on a palanquin along a wide, clear road, leading his armies from the city. You look at the perfect, straight lines of that carved road and wonder if the reality of travel was as clean and orderly as the story told in stone. The dust from the carving sheds seems to follow you, clinging to the damp air as you step out from the cool shade of the temple complex and onto one of the great arteries of the empire. The stone relief you just saw depicted a grand causeway, a perfectly paved royal road stretching to the horizon, flanked by cheering crowds and stone balustrades. The sun beats down, and you imagine the magnificent spectacle the king held aloft on his golden palanquin, war elephants draped in fine silks and regiments of soldiers marching in perfect formation on a stable, dry surface. This is the illusion of Khmer infrastructure, a vision of imperial power and control, of a network connecting the heart of the empire to its farthest provinces with the same geometric perfection as the barrays. You see this vision reflected in the great stone causeways that lead directly to the main temple entrances, magnificent bridges of laterite sandstone that span the moats, reinforcing the idea of a civilization that paved its way to greatness. These are the roads you see on maps, the straight, confident lines drawn by historians, suggesting an almost Roman-like command of civil engineering. Now, take a step forward onto the road itself. Your foot doesn't land on solid stone. It sinks, with a soft, sucking sound, into a deep, thick sludge of reddish-brown mud. This is the shocking reality of the royal roads. The grand stone causeways were largely ceremonial, limited to the immediate temple precincts. The vast network of highways that crisscrossed the empire, stretching for hundreds of miles through the dense jungle, were not paved. They were massive earthen embankments, built up from the surrounding soil, sometimes 10 to 20 feet high and 60 feet wide. During the dry season, they would have been hard-packed, dusty thoroughfares, passable for the ox carts that formed the logistical backbone of the empire. But you are here in the wet season, the monsoon season, when the heavens open up for months on end. The road has transformed into a treacherous, glutinous river of mud. It's a churned-up mess of clay, water, and whatever else has been dropped along the way. Your every step is a struggle, the mud grabbing at your ankles, threatening to pull your sandals right off your feet. This isn't just an inconvenience, it's a strategic nightmare. The mud is a trap. An ox cart's wheels would sink to their axles, the beasts straining, bellowing, unable to move the heavy load of rice or stone. A marching army would be slowed to a crawl, their supply lines stretched and vulnerable. And the mud wasn't just mud. It was a slurry of organic material. Animal droppings from the thousands of oxen and elephants, human waste from travelers and armies, rotting vegetation washed down from the jungle. It was all mixed into this warm, wet medium. It would have been a paradise for bacteria and parasites. A small cut on your foot, scraped open by a hidden root or stone, could quickly become infected in this environment, turning into a festering, tropical ulcer. The air would be thick with the stench of decay and the drone of flies and mosquitoes breeding in the countless puddles. To travel the royal road was to wade through a primordial soup of filth, risking disease with every step. The grand procession you imagined would be a chaotic, slogging struggle, the silk spattered with mud, the soldiers grimy and exhausted, the whole glorious parade mired in the very earth it was supposed to command. So why build roads of mud? Why would a civilization that could move mountains of stone not pave its highways? The answer, as always, lies in a pragmatic calculation of labor and resources against the realities of the environment. Paving hundreds of miles of road with stone through dense, remote jungle would have been an almost impossible undertaking, a diversion of labor and material that was needed for the construction of the temples and the maintenance of the all-important water system. The earthen embankments, by contrast, could be built relatively quickly using the most abundant local material, dirt. Their primary purpose was not to provide a clean surface, but to lift the road above the seasonal floodwaters. For much of the year, vast swaths of Cambodia become an inland sea. These raised causeways were the only way to ensure that communication and transport could continue, however slowly, during the monsoon. They were a brilliant adaptation to the landscape, a way to keep the empire connected when the world around them turned to water. The Khmer engineers weren't aiming for a pristine Roman road, they were aiming for a functional path that wouldn't disappear for half the year. Their priority was elevation, not pavement. The mud, the filth, the disease of these were simply the accepted costs of travel, an unavoidable part of life in this environment. As you pull your foot from the muck, you see a flash of colour at the roadside merchant, his fine silk robes hitched up high to keep them from the filth, his face a mask of weary resignation. You wonder how he manages to keep such beautiful garments clean in a world made of mud. The merchant you saw at the side of the muddy road is now making his way through the bustling crowds of the capital city. He has reached his destination, a nobleman's house, and is presenting his wares. You catch a glimpse of the fabric he unfurls, and it takes your breath away. It is Khmer silk, a legendary textile, so fine and luminous it seems to capture the light itself. The illusion is one of pure opulence and airy comfort. You see the high-ranking officials and royal dancers as they are depicted in the temple carvings. Draped in these magnificent cloths, the silk is patterned with intricate, geometric designs, diamonds, flowers, mythical creatures and vibrant colors of crimson, indigo and a shimmering, sunlight yellow. The cloth seems to float around their bodies, a weightless whisper of fabric that would surely be a relief in the oppressive, tropical heat. You imagine the feeling of this silk against your skin, smooth, cool, and dry. It is the uniform of the elite, a visible symbol of their status and purity, a stark contrast to the rough cotton loincloths of the common laborers. The silk itself tells a story of a refined and delicate culture, one that values beauty and artistry above all else. But now, step closer to one of these silk-clad nobles standing under the midday sun. The beautiful illusion of cool, airy comfort begins to dissolve in a wave of heat. The reality is that silk, for all its beauty, is a terrible choice for hot, humid weather. Unlike cotton or linen, which breathe and allow moisture to evaporate, silk is a protein fiber that traps heat and moisture against the skin. As the nobleman stands there, a film of sweat begins to form on his body. The exquisite silk garment, instead of floating, starts to cling. It sticks to his back, his chest, under his arms, outlining the damp reality of his body beneath. The vibrant dyes, especially the deep reds and indigos, would have been prone to running. You would see dark, wet patches forming on the fabric, a visible map of his perspiration. The beautiful, crisp patterns would start to look blotchy and damp. It would feel like being wrapped in a beautiful, warm, wet blanket. The sensation against the skin would be not cool and airy, but clammy, sticky, and deeply uncomfortable. And then, there is the smell. This is the shocking, and frankly, pungent reality of dressing for success in the Khmer Empire. The trapped sweat doesn't just evaporate, it begins to interact with the bacteria on the skin, creating the unmistakable, sharp odor of body odor. In a world without modern deodorants, this was an unavoidable fact of life. Now, add to this the nature of the silk itself. The shimmering, prized golden silk of Cambodia is produced by a specific silkworm, the Antheraea melita, which feeds on mango and fig leaves. The raw silk thread, when spun, retains a certain animal scent, and the dyes used to create those vibrant colors were derived from organic sources. The brilliant yellows might come from jackfruit wood or turmeric, the deep reds from lac, a resin secreted by an insect, and the dark indigos from fermented plants. These natural dyes, when combined with the silk and the wearer's sweat, would create a complex, and not always pleasant, bouquet. The glamorous courtier, who looks so pristine in the stone carvings, would in reality be walking around in a personal cloud of damp silk, stale sweat, and the faint, earthy smells of lac resin and fermented indigo. The closer you got to the elite, the more overpowering this scent of wilting glamour would become. So why on earth would they choose to wear this? Why swaddle themselves in a beautiful, expensive, but ultimately hot and sticky fabric? The reason is purely about status. The choice of clothing had nothing to do with personal comfort, and everything to do with displaying wealth and power. Cotton was common and cheap. Silk, particularly the intricately patterned kind known as whole, was incredibly labor-intensive to produce. The complex designs were created by tie-dyeing the silk threads before they were woven, a process requiring immense skill and time. Owning and wearing such a garment was the ancient equivalent of driving a luxury car or wearing a designer watch. It was a non-verbal declaration that you were a person of immense importance, someone who did not need to labor in the fields, someone so wealthy you could afford to be impractical. The physical discomfort was a small price to pay for the immense social status it conferred. The king and his highest officials might even wear fabrics interwoven with gold or silver thread, further increasing the weight, the heat, and the message of untouchable power. The stickiness, the sweat, the smell, these were all just part of the price of admission to the highest echelons of society. The common folk, sweating in their simple cotton loincloths, were probably far more comfortable, but the nobleman in his damp, fragrant silks was the one who commanded respect. As he walks past, the smell of his fine clothes is mixed with another, far more pervasive scent that hangs in the city air, the smell of the empire's true fuel. That pervasive scent, the one that underpins the smell of damp silk and muddy earth, follows you as you move from the noble houses towards the heart of the common city, the market. Here, the air is thick with 1,000 smells, the sweetness of ripe mangoes, the earthy scent of raw vegetables, the smoky aroma of cooking fires. But one smell dominates all others. It's a powerful, pungent, almost shockingly salty and savory aroma that seems to coat the back of your throat. It's the smell of prahok, the famous and infamous Cambodian fermented fish paste. You see it everywhere, displayed in huge earthenware jars, a thick, greyish-brown paste, sometimes flecked with the silver of tiny, whole fish. This is the glamorous illusion of Khmer cuisine, at least from a distance. You see the stone reliefs of grand royal banquets, of feasts laden with exotic fruits and roasted meats. You imagine a delicate, subtle cuisine, fit for the gods and the kings who served them. You think of the fragrant jasmine rice, the coconuts, the lemongrass, the galangal, all the fresh, vibrant flavors of Southeast Asia. Prahok, in this context, seems like a crude and humble peasant food, the seasoning of the poor. Now, step closer to one of those open jars in the market. The smell intensifies. It's no longer just a savory background note, it's an overwhelming wave of pure, concentrated funk. This is not the clean, salty smell of the sea. It's the smell of fish that has been crushed, salted, and left to decompose for weeks or months in the tropical heat. It's a smell of intense, borderline rotting animal protein. You can see the flies buzzing eagerly around the rims of the jars. The vendor uses a wooden paddle to stir the thick paste, and the movement releases a fresh burst of the potent aroma. This is the shocking reality of what powered the empire. Prahok wasn't just a seasoning. It was the primary source of protein for the vast majority of the population. The Great Tole Sap Lake, a unique and massive body of water connected to the Mekong River, produced an almost unbelievable quantity of fish during the flood season. The Khmer developed an ingenious method to preserve this seasonal bounty. They would catch tons of small fish, crush them underfoot, salt them heavily, and pack them into jars to ferment. This fermented paste was, in essence, a nutritional battery. It was shelf-stable, protein-dense, and rich in essential minerals. A small amount stirred into a pot of rice or a vegetable stew could transform a simple, carbohydrate-heavy meal into something much more nutritionally complete. This was the fuel that fed the armies, the farmers, and the thousands of laborers who cut the stones and built the temples. The glory of Angkor was quite literally built on a foundation of fermented fish. But the process of making it was anything but glamorous. Imagine villages along the lake during the fishing season. The ground would be covered in a silver carpet of millions of tiny, dying fish. The air for miles around would be thick with the smell of their decay. People would stomp on them, mashing them with their bare feet, mixing the fish guts, scales, and flesh into a uniform pulp before packing it with salt. The stench would be unbearable to a modern nose, and the entire process was swarming with insects. There was no sterile factory, no quality control beyond the experienced eye of the maker. This was a primal, visceral, and incredibly smelly business. So why was this funky, fermented food so central to the Khmer way of life? The reason lies in the rhythm of the seasons and the sheer genius of their food preservation technology. The Tole Sap Lake provides a massive glut of fish for a few months of the year, but far less during the dry season. Without refrigeration, this enormous catch would rot and be wasted within days. Fermentation, using salt as a preservative, was the only way to store this protein for the rest of the year. Prahok was the solution to the fundamental problem of boom and bust. It allowed the Khmer to capture the explosive productivity of the wet season and distribute it throughout the dry season. It was a technology as vital as the berets. The god kings could command the water to grow the rice, but it was the common people's prahok that provided the strength to harvest it. The complex, sometimes off-putting flavor was something people grew up with, a taste they craved, the taste of home. It was the savory, umami-rich heart of their diet. To the Khmer, the smell of prahok wasn't the smell of rot. It was the smell of survival, of sustenance, of life itself. It was the scent of a full belly and a strong body. As you turn from the market, you see a monk walking by, his head shaved, his saffron robes a stark contrast to the chaos of the stalls. He carries a small satchel, and you can't help but wonder how the sacred knowledge he protects is recorded and preserved in this world of overwhelming humidity and biological decay. The monk you saw in the market makes his way back to the quiet sanctuary of his monastery, a wooden building nestled in the shadow of a great stone temple. You follow him into a library, and the air changes. It's cooler here, shaded from the sun, and carries the faint, dry, papery scent of old books. You see rows of chests and cabinets, intricately carved from dark, heavy wood. This is the repository of the empire's knowledge. The illusion is one of permanence and scholarly order, a place where the sacred texts, The royal chronicles, the legal codes, and the epic poems are kept safe for eternity. You imagine heavy, leather-bound tomes, like those of a European monastery, their pages filled with beautiful, handwritten script, their knowledge locked away securely, resistant to the passage of time. This library, you think, is the empire's memory, a solid, tangible record of its civilization, as enduring as the stone temples themselves. But the monk doesn't open a chest to pull out a book. Instead, he lifts the lid of a long, narrow box and carefully removes what looks like a bundle of thin, dried leaves. He lays one of the leaves, about 2 feet long and a few inches wide, on a wooden stand. This is a palm leaf manuscript, the primary writing material of the entire empire. The shocking reality of the Khmer library is its almost terrifying fragility. There are no books here, no paper, no parchment. All of the empire's knowledge, its religion, its history, its science was inscribed onto the treated leaves of the talipot or palmyra palm. An artisan would use a sharp metal stylus to scratch the letters into the surface of the leaf. Then, they would rub a mixture of soot, charcoal, or turmeric mixed with oil over the surface, which would fill in the scratches and make the writing visible. The finished leaves for a single text would be gathered, a hole drilled through them, and a string threaded through to bind them between 2 wooden covers. This technology was ingenious, but it created a record that was in a constant state of war with its environment. The Cambodian climate, with its intense humidity and heat, is the perfect enemy of dried vegetable matter. The leaves were a feast for insects like silverfish and bookworms. In the damp air, mold and mildew were a constant threat, their tendrils creeping across the pages, obscuring the sacred texts with black and green blotches. The leaves themselves were brittle. They could crack if handled improperly. The ink could fade. A fire could destroy the entire library in minutes. A flood or even a leaky roof during the monsoon season could turn 1,000 precious manuscripts into a pile of rotting compost. The empire's memory was not stored in stone, but on the most delicate, ephemeral medium imaginable. The monks and scribes were not just scholars, they were engaged in a desperate, never-ending battle against decay. They had to regularly air out the manuscripts, clean them, and, most importantly, constantly recopy them. The text survived only as long as there was someone to copy it onto new leaves before the old ones crumbled into dust. So why use such a fragile medium? Why not carve the most important texts into stone? A few official inscriptions were indeed carved on temple walls, but this was impractical for lengthy works. Stone is laborious to carve and impossible to transport easily. The palm leaf, however, was a perfectly logical choice given the available resources. The palm trees grew in abundance, making the raw material cheap and readily available. The process of treating the leaves and writing on them was far faster and required less specialized skill than carving stone. Palm leaf manuscripts were lightweight and portable, allowing knowledge to be disseminated across the empire, carried by monks like the one you are watching. The fragility of the medium was accepted as part of the natural order of things, a reflection of the Buddhist concept of anicca, or impermanence. The physical object was not what was truly important, it was the knowledge it contained. The act of constantly recopying the texts was a form of meditation, a way of keeping the knowledge alive not just on the page, but in the minds of the scribes. The survival of their civilization's wisdom depended not on a durable material, but on a continuous, living tradition of scholarship. The monk traces the delicate script with his finger, his lips moving silently. You see that some of the text describes the founding of the king's great Arajya Sala, or houses of healing, promising care for all his subjects. You wonder if the medicine practiced there was as precise and ordered as the script used to describe it. Your journey takes you from the quiet fragility of the palm leaf library to the hopeful corridors of one of the empire's famed Arajya Sala, or houses of healing. An inscription from the great King Jayavarman Vair boasts that he built 102 of these hospitals across his empire, declaring the pain of his subjects' bodies was for him spiritual pain and more sharp. The illusion is one of an enlightened, compassionate state providing systematic healthcare. You imagine a place of clean, quiet order, perhaps not with modern technology, but with a logical, herbal-based medicinal system. You picture physicians, wise in the ways of plants and anatomy, moving from bed to bed, dispensing effective treatments. The temple reliefs show serene figures being attended to, and you envision these hospitals as precursors to modern public health initiatives, a testament to a king who cared deeply for the physical well-being of his people. It feels like a remarkably progressive, almost secular institution, a place of science and healing amidst the religious fervor. But as you step inside, the scent of the place is the first thing that hits you. It's not the clean, antiseptic smell of a modern hospital. It's a thick, cloying miasma of incense, smouldering herbs, animal fat salves, and the unmistakable sour smell of sickness itself. This is the shocking reality of the Khmer healing house. It was less a hospital in our sense of the word, and more a spiritual battleground. The patients lie not on clean beds, but on simple wooden platforms or mats on the floor. There is no concept of quarantine. A man with a hacking, bloody cough lies next to a woman with a raging fever, who lies next to a man with a festering wound. The air buzzes with flies, drawn by the open sores and the offerings of food left for the spirits. The physicians are not just doctors, they are primarily priests and ritual specialists. A diagnosis is made not just by observing symptoms, but through astrology, numerology, and divination to see which spirit or god has been offended. The treatments are a bewildering mix of the potentially effective and the deeply magical. You see a healer grinding herbs with a mortar and pestle, creating a poultice. This might actually help. Many local plants had genuine medicinal properties. But then you see another healer chanting loudly over a patient, shaking a rattle to scare away the malevolent spirit believed to be causing the fever. You see another preparing a potion that contains not just herbs, but also powdered animal horn, a pinch of dirt from a sacred place, and perhaps a drop of mercury, a potent neurotoxin. A surgeon might be called to set a broken bone or even drain an abscess, but there is no concept of sterilization. The same knife used to lance a boil would be wiped on a dirty cloth and used on the next patient, virtually guaranteeing the spread of infection. The water used to clean wounds would be drawn from the same local sources, the barriers or rivers that were teeming with bacteria. A patient might survive their initial injury or illness only to die from a secondary infection acquired within the hospital itself. So why this approach? Why was Khmer medicine a fusion of ritual and folk remedy rather than a purely scientific pursuit? It's because, in their worldview, the physical and the spiritual were inseparable. Sickness was not simply a biological malfunction, it was a symptom of a deeper cosmic imbalance. A person could fall ill because of bad karma from a past life, because they had neglected their ancestral spirits, or because a sorcerer had cursed them. Therefore, a purely physical treatment was seen as incomplete. You had to treat the spiritual root of the problem. The chanting, the offerings, the astrological charts, these weren't superstitions. They were considered essential medical procedures. The king, by building these hospitals, was not just providing health care. He was providing spiritual care on a mass scale. He was demonstrating his piety and his power to mediate between the human and the divine realms. Each hospital was centered around a shrine to Basajiaguru, the medicine Buddha, and healing was an act of devotion. The primary goal was to restore spiritual harmony, with the hope that physical healing would follow. If a patient died, it might not be seen as a medical failure, but as the result of karma that was simply too heavy to overcome in this life. As you watch a healer apply a gleaming, golden-coloured salve to a patient's wound, you are struck by the Khmer fascination with all things that glitter, and you wonder about the true cost of the brilliant gold that adorns every sacred object in the empire. That gleaming, golden colour you saw in the healing house, a touch of the sun in a place of shadow, is a colour that defines the empire. As you move through the city, it's everywhere. You look up at the central tower of a great temple and its spire, sheathed in gold leaf, catches the midday sun, blazing like a captured star, a beacon of divine power visible for miles. You witness a royal procession emerging from the palace. The king is carried on a palanquin of exquisitely carved wood, every surface glittering with gold. He wears heavy gold bracelets, anklets, and a magnificent pointed crown. Even his parasols, shielding his divine skin from the sun, are tiered and tipped with gold. The illusion is one of almost unimaginable wealth, of a civilization so rich that it uses the most precious metal on earth as a common architectural element. The gold seems to radiate a sacred power. It is the color of the sun, the symbol of the gods, a material that does not tarnish or decay. To be surrounded by gold is to be surrounded by divinity and permanence. This is the image the Khmer Empire presented to the world, a sun-drenched kingdom of golden towers and golden gods. Now, let's pull back the curtain on this dazzling spectacle. Let's leave the grand procession and follow a single, gilded artifact back to its source. We enter a smoky, sweltering workshop, tucked away in a less glamorous quarter of the city. The air here is thick not with incense, but with charcoal smoke and the sharp, metallic tang of hot metal. In the center of the room, a craftsman is hunched over a small furnace, his face slick with sweat. He is working on a bronze statue of a deity, destined for a temple niche. But he is not hammering gold leaf onto it. He is practicing a far more effective and far more insidious art. Fire gilding. He takes a small lump of a strange, clay-like paste and begins to meticulously smear it across the bronze surface. The paste is a mixture of gold dust and something else, a substance that looks like liquid silver, that moves and pools with an uncanny weight. Mercury. This is the shocking, toxic reality behind the golden gleam. Once the bronze statue is coated in this poisonous amalgam, the craftsman carefully places it over the glowing charcoal fire. As the metal heats up, a strange, terrifying magic happens. The mercury, with its low boiling point, begins to vaporize. It turns into a clear, odorless and invisible gas that silently fills the small, poorly ventilated workshop, rising directly into the artisan's face. What is left behind is a perfect, matte layer of gold, chemically bonded to the surface of the bronze. The process is repeated until the entire statue is covered. Then it will be burnished to a brilliant shine. The final product is magnificent, a durable, seamless coat of pure gold that looks as if it were part of the original casting. But the cost is devastating. The mercury vapor the artisan has been breathing in is a powerful neurotoxin. It passes directly from his lungs into his bloodstream, and from there, into his brain. As you watch him, you notice his hands tremble slightly, a tremor he tries to control as he works. This is the beginning of mercury poisoning. Over months and years, the poison would accumulate, leading to Hatter's shakes, memory loss, loosened teeth, kidney failure, and eventually, a terrifying descent into madness. The very men who created these serene, eternal images of the gods were being driven insane by the process. He is making something eternal, and it is making him temporary. So why employ a technique that was so obviously destructive to the craftsman? The answer is a combination of superior technology and a brutal disregard for the artisan's well-being. Fire gilding was, simply put, the most effective way to gild metal. It created a finish far more durable than simply sticking on gold leaf with lacquer, which would quickly peel and flake in the tropical humidity. The final result was unparalleled in its beauty and permanence. To the Khmer, who likely had no concept of invisible, poisonous vapors, the sickness of the gilders would have been attributed to other causes: unfriendly spirits jealous of the sacred work, bad karma, or a failure to perform the correct rituals. The work was for the gods and the king, a sacred duty. The suffering of the craftsman was a secondary concern, perhaps even seen as a necessary sacrifice to create such a powerful object. The gilded statue, now cool and gleaming, is finally ready. It is carried from this dark, toxic workshop, out into the sun, and installed in a place of honor. It will be worshipped in a great stone temple, the focus of 1,000,000 prayers. But these temples, for all their grandeur, were not where most people lived. They were the city's bones, not its flesh and blood. Just beyond their stone enclosures lay another city entirely. You stand at the edge of the vast stone terrace of the Elephant Terrace, the ceremonial heart of the royal city of Angkor Thom. From this vantage point, you look out over a grand plaza, and beyond it, the remaining stone towers of the city's temples rise above the jungle canopy. This is the Angkor that has survived, the city that captivates our imagination. It is a city of stone, a fortress of faith, with its causeways, its galleries, its towers carved with the faces of gods and kings. The illusion is that this was the city. We see these magnificent, almost indestructible stone skeletons and assume that the Khmer people lived their lives within these sacred precincts, walking on stone floors and sleeping in stone chambers. We imagine a civilization whose daily life was as monumental and permanent as its architecture. It feels like a city of giants, a place where every structure was built to last for eternity. The world sees Angkor as these temples, a majestic, silent, and largely empty stone ruin. Now, take a step off the stone terrace. Not onto the ceremonial plaza, but to the side, into the dense tangle of trees and vines that presses in on all sides. Push past the broad leaves and tangled roots. Within 50 feet, the stone vanishes. You are in a different world. The ground beneath your feet is soft earth, not paved stone. The air is thick with the smell of wood smoke, cooking food, and the damp, organic scent of the jungle floor. This is the shocking reality of Angkor. It wasn't a city of stone. It was a city of wood. The stone temples and terraces were merely the sacred, political, and administrative core. The real city, the sprawling metropolis where up to 1,000,000 people lived, worked, and died, was a vast, low-rise urban landscape built almost entirely from perishable materials, wood, bamboo, and thatch. You are now standing where a bustling residential street would have been. Instead of stone monuments, You would have seen thousands of wooden houses raised on stilts to protect them from the seasonal floods and the crawling creatures of the jungle. Their walls would be woven bamboo, their roofs thatched with palm leaves. This wooden city was a place of incredible life and incredible filth. It was a noisy, crowded, and organic metropolis. You would hear the crowing of chickens kept under the houses, the laughter of children, the rhythmic thumping of women pounding rice, the chatter of neighbors. But there was no sewage system. Waste, both human and animal, was simply thrown out, often into the spaces beneath the stilted houses. The pigs and dogs that roamed the city streets were not just pets, they were a roaming sanitation department, consuming the refuse. During the dry season, the accumulated waste would dry out, turning to dust. During the wet season, it would transform into a stinking, muddy slurry, a perfect breeding ground for cholera and other waterborne diseases. The houses themselves, made of wood and thatch, were a constant fire hazard. A single stray spark from a cooking fire could easily ignite a roof, and in the dry season, a fire could spread with terrifying speed, consuming entire districts of the city. To live in the city of Angkor was to live in a tinderbox perched on top of a latrine. So why build their entire residential and commercial city from such temporary, vulnerable materials? The answer lies in a rigid social and religious hierarchy that was reflected in their building codes. Stone was a sacred material, reserved exclusively for the gods and, by extension, the god king. To build a private home from stone would have been an act of sacrilege, a blasphemous presumption of divine status. Only the temples and certain royal structures were permitted to be built from this eternal material. Everyone else, from the highest noble to the poorest rice farmer, lived in wooden structures. This distinction reinforced the cosmic order. The transient, perishable homes of the mortals stood in contrast to the eternal, indestructible homes of the gods. This wasn't a choice based on a lack of resources, it was a deliberate and deeply meaningful architectural statement. The Khmer could have easily built a city of brick or stone for its people, but that would have violated their understanding of the universe. The disappearance of this vast wooden city is why the temples seem so isolated today. We are only seeing the sacred skeleton. The living, breathing, noisy, dirty, vibrant city that once surrounded it has been completely reclaimed by the jungle, swallowed by the very environment it was built from, leaving only the stone bones behind. As you look at the towering stone temples in the distance, you can't help but marvel at the sheer effort it must have taken to quarry, transport, and raise those massive blocks. You are now standing at the foot of one of those temple mountains, perhaps the mighty Angkor Wat itself, its 5 towers soaring into the sky like lotus buds. You gaze up at the sheer scale of the construction. Millions of sandstone blocks, each weighing several tons, fitted together with a precision that is baffling even to modern engineers. The stones are so perfectly joined that you can't slip a knife blade between them. There is no mortar, the weight of the stones alone holds them in place. The illusion is one of impossible, almost magical, creation. The sheer scale and perfection of it tempts the mind to seek fantastic explanations. Did they have lost ancient technologies? Did they possess secrets of levitation? Did they, as some myths suggest, have help from the gods or giants? The finished temple feels serene and weightless, as if it grew from the earth rather than being built upon it. It seems to transcend the messy, brutal reality of physical labor. Now, turn away from the finished tower and walk towards the jungle's edge, where a causeway is still under construction. The air of serene magic evaporates, replaced by the stench of sweat and the rhythmic sounds of raw, human effort. You see the truth, and it is far more impressive than any myth. A team of men is moving one of those giant sandstone blocks. It sits on a wooden sledge, its runners slick with mud or grease to reduce friction. Dozens of men, their bodies lean and corded with muscle, pull on thick ropes woven from coconut fiber. At the back, more men push, their bare feet slipping in the mud. There are no wheels, no cranes, no magical incantations. There is only a deep, guttural, rhythmic chant, a collective grunt of immense strain that synchronizes their pull. This is the shocking reality of how Angkor was built, with brute force, organized on a colossal scale. The block moves inches at a time, a slow, agonizing crawl from the quarry miles away, or from the canals where it was floated on massive barges. This process was not just strenuous, it was lethally dangerous. A rope could snap under the immense tension, whipping back and maiming, or killing the men pulling it. A block could slip from its sledge, crushing anyone in its path. You see men with missing fingers, with jagged scars on their arms and legs. These are the survivors, the veterans of this long, slow war against gravity. And this is just the transport. To raise the blocks up the steep, stepped sides of the temple, they used massive earthen ramps, which had to be built up as the temple grew higher and then removed at the end. They used wooden levers, pulleys, and scaffolding, all of which could fail. Every single one of the millions of stones that make up Angkor Wat represents a journey of immense toil and risk. You watch one team finally get their block to the base of the wall. Another team takes over, using long, heavy levers to painstakingly inch it up the ramp, a process that could take all day. The serene temple rising behind them is a monument built on a foundation of sprained backs, crushed limbs, and unbelievable, relentless exhaustion. So why this method? Why not develop more sophisticated mechanical aids? The answer is that the Khmer engineers were masters of a different kind of science, the science of labor management. Their greatest invention wasn't a machine, it was a system for organizing and motivating a massive workforce. In the Khmer Empire, the most abundant and cheapest resource was people. The king, through a system of corv labor, could call upon a huge percentage of the male population to work on his projects for a portion of the year. This wasn't slave labor in the traditional sense, it was a religious duty and a tax, paid in sweat rather than silver. The engineer's genius lay in breaking down this monumental task into simple, repeatable actions that could be performed by a vast, largely unskilled labor force using simple, easily replaceable tools. They perfected the logistics of moving tens of thousands of men, feeding them with the rice from the barres and the prahok from the lake, and directing their collective muscle power towards a single goal. The motivation, as with the stone carvers, was also spiritual. To work on the temple was to build a house for the gods, an act that generated immense spiritual merit for the kingdom and for the individual laborer. The king didn't need cranes when he could command the synchronized power of 50,000 men. The sweat, the pain, the sheer human effort were part of the offering, sanctifying the stones they moved. As the sun beats down on the sweating workers, you hear a distant roar from the city plaza. It's not the sound of construction, but the sound of a crowd, gathered for a different kind of spectacle. The roar of the crowd pulls you from the grinding labor of the construction site back toward the grand plaza in the center of Angkor Thom. From a distance, the sound is one of celebration. You see the elephant terrace crowded with dignitaries, shaded by colorful parasols. The king himself is seated in a golden pavilion, observing the festivities. The illusion, reinforced by the delicate carvings of celestial dancers that grace so many temple walls, is of a culture defined by grace and refined artistry. We think of the Khmer court as a place of serene classical dance, where women with impossibly flexible bodies and intricate costumes reenact Hindu epics, their movements slow, deliberate, and deeply symbolic. You imagine the entertainment to be as ordered and beautiful as the temples themselves, a reflection of a harmonious and gentle society. This is the image of Khmer culture that has been most widely celebrated, the ethereal grace of the Apsara dancer. But as you get closer to the plaza, the nature of the crowd's roar changes. It's not the sound of appreciative applause, it's a raw, bloodthirsty bellow. You push your way through the throng and see the center of the plaza. It's not a dance floor, it's an arena. And the spectacle is not one of grace, but of shocking, brutal violence. Two wild boars, their tusks sharpened, are being goaded into fighting each other to the death. The dust of the plaza is dark and wet with their blood. This is just the opening act. According to the accounts of the Chinese diplomat Zhu Daguan, who visited Angkor in the 13th century, this was just the beginning. After the boar fight, there might be a fight between two rams. And then, the main event, human gladiators. Men, perhaps prisoners of war or criminals, would be forced to fight each other, likely to the death, for the entertainment of the king and the crowd. Zhu Daguan even mentions that the king would stage fights between his concubines, pitting them against each other in the arena. This wasn't a rare or hidden event. It was public entertainment, a state-sponsored spectacle. The serene court that patronized the delicate dancers also revelled in these bloody contests. The plaza you stand in, the very heart of the royal city, would be transformed into a space of public carnage. Imagine the scene, the dust, the sweat, the smell of blood and fear, the frenzied betting of the onlookers, the raw, visceral thrill of life and death combat played out as a sport. The same king who listened to Buddhist monks chant about compassion in the morning might watch men kill each other for his amusement in the afternoon. The sophisticated culture that produced sublime art and architecture also had a deep-seated appetite for public brutality. The graceful dancer and the bloody gladiator were two sides of the same coin, both performing for the pleasure of the court. So why this stark contrast? Why did a society that valued spiritual harmony and artistic grace also indulge in such savage entertainment? The reasons are complex, touching on politics, religion, and human nature. Firstly, these spectacles were a powerful display of the king's absolute authority. The power over life and death was the ultimate expression of royal power. By staging these fights, the king demonstrated his control not just over his subjects, but over the very forces of chaos and violence. He could unleash them for his entertainment and then contain them, reinforcing his role as the master of order. Secondly, these events may have served a religious or ritualistic purpose, perhaps as a form of symbolic sacrifice or a way to appease powerful, aggressive deities. The violence was not random, it was framed within a ceremonial context. Finally, it speaks to a universal, if unsettling, aspect of human societies. From the Roman Colosseum to the public executions of medieval Europe, state-sponsored violence has often been a popular form of mass entertainment, a way to channel collective aggression and provide a thrilling, visceral experience for the populace. The Khmer were not uniquely brutal, they were simply human, their culture a complex tapestry woven from threads of both sublime beauty and savage cruelty. The king, watching impassively from his golden pavilion, seemed so remote, so powerful, but you start to wonder if his life, a performance of divinity, was truly his own. From the bloody chaos of the public plaza, you are now granted a rare entry into the gilded world of the royal palace itself. You pass through gates guarded by stone demons and enter a series of courtyards and wooden pavilions so ornate they seem more like jewelry than architecture. The air is heavy with the scent of flowers and incense. Servants move with silent, practiced grace. The king, the Devaraja or god king, is seated on a high throne. He is not a man, he is an icon. He is draped in gold and silks, unmoving, his expression a mask of divine impassivity. The illusion is one of absolute power and freedom. Here is a man who wants for nothing. His every whim is law. He commands armies, builds temples that touch the sky, and holds the power of life and death over 1 million subjects. He is the living incarnation of a god on earth, a life of unimaginable luxury, ease, and authority. To be the god king of the Khmer Empire seems like the ultimate fulfillment of human ambition. But as you observe him for more than a few moments, a different reality begins to seep through the perfumed air. Look closely at his face. The divine mask is heavy. He hasn't moved a muscle for what seems like an eternity. He is not sitting, he is being displayed, like the gilded statues in the temples. This is the shocking reality of his existence. The god king was not a master, but a prisoner. He was trapped in a cage of ritual and expectation, his every moment governed by a rigid schedule of religious ceremony and public performance. His life was not his own. From the moment he woke, he was dressed by attendants, his every garment and piece of jewelry imbued with sacred significance. His meals were not a matter of personal taste, but ritual offerings. He could not simply walk through his city, he had to be carried in a palanquin, shielded by parasols, his sacred feet never touching the common ground. The Chinese envoy, Zhu Daguan, reported that the king had to meet with his ministers and adjudicate legal matters twice a day, seated on a golden-framed window, a public performance of justice. He was constantly surrounded by his court, his wives, his concubines, his officials, and his guards. He had no privacy. Every word he spoke, every gesture he made, was scrutinized for its political and religious meaning. A simple frown could be interpreted as a sign of divine displeasure, a smile as a blessing on a new policy. The pressure to maintain this performance of flawless divinity must have been immense. He could show no weakness, no fatigue, no doubt. He was less a person and more the central cog in the great machine of the state, a living symbol whose personal desires were utterly subordinate to his symbolic function. Even his private life was a matter of state. The king was required to ascend to the temple of Phamenakas each night to mate with a 9-headed serpent spirit, a naga, who took the form of a woman. If he failed to appear for even a single night, it was believed that disaster would befall the kingdom. His very body was not his own. It was a ritual vessel, essential for the continued prosperity and stability of the empire. So why would anyone endure, or even aspire to, such a life? The position of the god king was not merely about personal power, it was about cosmic responsibility. The king was the essential link between the world of the gods and the world of men. His constant, perfect performance of ritual was what maintained the cosmic order, ensuring the rains would come, the harvests would be plentiful, and the kingdom would be protected from its enemies. The system was designed to elevate the office so high that the man holding it became secondary. This supreme power was also the supreme burden. While he held the power of life and death over others, He had no control over his own life. The gilded palace was not a home, it was a stage. The silken robes and golden crown were not adornments, they were a costume. And the endless rituals were a script he could never deviate from. His prison was beautiful, but it was a prison neanderthals. A sudden commotion at the edge of the palace grounds breaks the ceremonial stillness. A messenger, breathless and covered in dust, has arrived from the frontier. He brings news of war. The god king must now perform his most fearsome role, the commander-in-chief. The news of war has transformed the god king from a static icon into a figure of terrifying purpose. You now see him as he is depicted on the vast stone galleries of the Bayon Temple, mounted high atop a magnificent war elephant, his face a mask of cold fury, leading his armies to glorious, inevitable victory. The illusion is one of perfect military might. The stone reliefs show a disciplined, unstoppable force. Ranks of spearmen march in perfect lockstep. The war elephants, like living battleships, are draped in rich fabrics and elaborate armor, with warriors perched in fortified howdahs on their backs. They are instruments of divine wrath, trampling the empire's enemies underfoot. The entire scene is one of clean lines, heroic poses, and the righteous, orderly procession of power. It's a war imagined by an artist, a conflict as clean and geometric as the empire's great reservoirs. Now, you are no longer an observer in the palace. You are a soldier in that army, on the march. And the glorious illusion shatters in the first 100 yards. You are not marching on a wide, clear road. Remember the royal roads of mud. In the deep jungle, there are no roads at all. The army is a great, chaotic beast, hacking and crushing its way through a wall of green. The air doesn't ring with heroic trumpets, it's a cacophony of cracking bamboo, splintering wood, the screams of monkeys and the constant, high-pitched whine of a billion insects. The heat is a physical presence, a wet, heavy blanket that suffocates you. Sweat pours from your body, soaking your simple loincloth, but it brings no relief. And then there is the elephant. The great beast just ahead of you isn't a silent, majestic ship of war. It's a force of nature, noisy and destructive. It crashes through the undergrowth, its immense weight churning the soft earth into a knee-deep mire of mud and rotting leaves. This is the shocking, miserable reality of jungle warfare. Your enemy isn't just the opposing army you are marching to meet. It's the jungle itself. Leeches, an inch long and hungry, drop from the leaves above, silently attaching to your exposed skin to drink their fill. Mosquitoes, which you barely notice, deliver malaria and dengue fever with silent, deadly efficiency. The water you cup from a stream is likely swimming with the same microscopic enemies you'd find in the city's barrays, promising dysentery and cholera. A simple scratch from a thorn can turn into a raging, infected ulcer in a matter of days in the perpetual damp. And then there is the smell. It's a potent brew of crushed, rotting vegetation, the ever-present stench of mud, your own unwashed sweat, and the overwhelming, sour-sweet odor of elephant dung. A single war elephant can produce over 200 pounds of dung a day. Multiply that by a force of several hundred elephants, and you realize you are not marching to war, you are wading through a slow-moving river of filth generated by your own army. So why rely on these massive, messy, and logistically demanding animals? Why was the elephant the centerpiece of Khmer military strategy? Because in this terrain, the elephant was the only heavy weapon that worked. It was the ancient world's all-terrain vehicle, and its main battle tank rolled into one. On the battlefield, a charging line of war elephants was a terrifying psychological weapon, capable of shattering an infantry line through sheer panic. From his high perch in the howdah, a commander could survey the entire battlefield, a view impossible from the ground. They were mobile watchtowers and firing platforms for archers. But their needs were colossal. Each elephant required hundreds of pounds of vegetation and dozens of gallons of water every single day. The army's movement was dictated not by military strategy, but by the constant, desperate need to forage for its elephants. An entire corps of attendants, the mahouts, were dedicated to their care, feeding, and doctoring. The war elephant was a symbol of the king's power, but it was also a logistical black hole, consuming resources at a prodigious rate. The ability to field and sustain a large elephant corps was itself a testament to the organizational genius of the empire, an invention as crucial as any tool. As you huddle around a small fire at the end of another miserable day's march, you eat your meager ration of rice from a simple, crudely made ceramic bowl. You wonder where these thousands of bowls, pots and other essential wares come from, the humble, unseen foundation of this mighty war machine. Back from the sweltering misery of the jungle march, you find yourself on the outskirts of the great city, drawn by a pillar of dark smoke rising into the humid air. You are approaching one of the great industrial zones of the empire, a place dedicated to the transformative power of fire. As you get closer, you see them, long, low, earthen structures, like great sleeping beasts half buried in the ground. These are the dragon kilns, the ceramic factories of Angkor. The illusion of Khmer ceramics is often one of high art. You may have seen the exquisite pieces in a museum, a graceful vase with a celadon glaze so perfect it looks like captured moonlight, a lime pot in the shape of a bird, its details charming and precise, or a kendi, a ceremonial water vessel with a rich, chocolate-brown glaze. These are treasures, items of beauty and refinement that would have graced the altars of temples or the homes of the nobility. They speak of a culture with a deep appreciation for delicate, sophisticated artistry, but as you step into the vicinity of the kiln, the air shimmers with a ferocious, palpable heat. The low, guttural roar of the fire inside the kiln is a constant, intimidating presence. This is not the delicate studio of a lone artist, it is a brutal, industrial powerhouse. The ground is littered with a graveyard of failed experiments, shards of pottery that cracked from the heat, pots whose glazes ran and blistered, vessels that fused together into grotesque sculptures, and the men working here are not calm, contemplative artists. They are covered in sweat, clay, and soot. Their faces are grim with concentration as they feed massive logs into the firebox at the kiln's mouth, a hellish, glowing maw that belches heat and sparks. This is the shocking, fiery reality behind the serene, glazed surfaces of Khmer pottery. The dragon kilns were massive, cross-draft kilns, sometimes over 100 feet long, built into the side of a hill to create a natural chimney. They could hold thousands of pots at a time, and firing one was a massive, days-long undertaking that consumed tons of wood. The process was a high-stakes gamble with the elements. The potters would spend weeks or months making the wares to fill the kiln. Then, for 3 or 4 days straight, day and night, the firemasters had to feed the blaze, slowly, carefully raising the temperature inside to over 1200 degrees Celsius. They had no thermometers. They judged the temperature by the color of the flame and the glow of the pots visible through small peepholes along the kiln's length, a skill born of years of experience and countless failures. A moment's inattention, a misjudgment of the fuel, or a sudden change in the wind could ruin the entire firing, wasting months of labor and a small forest's worth of wood, and the work was incredibly dangerous. The intense radiant heat could cause serious burns. The smoke, thick with ash and toxic gases from the glazes, would have been devastating to the lungs. The men worked in a constant state of exhaustion and dehydration, battling the fire they had created. So why this obsession with high-fire glazed stoneware? Many cultures made do with simple, low-fire earthenware. The answer is that the Khmer were masters of mass production, and these kilns were a key technology. While they produced the exquisite art pieces for the elite, their primary output was far more mundane, the millions of simple, durable, glazed bowls, jars and roof tiles that were the essential hardware of the empire. Glazed stoneware was non-porous and easy to clean, making it far more hygienic for storing food and water than porous earthenware, a crucial advantage in a world rife with disease. The roof tiles, produced by the 100,000, protected the wooden temples and palaces from the monsoon rains. The kilns were a strategic asset, as important as the iron forges or bronze foundries. The fire masters who commanded these ceramic dragons were not just artists, they were industrial chemists, wielding the power of fire to transform common clay into the durable goods that held their civilization together. Their invention was the ability to create beauty and utility on a massive scale. As you watch them finally seal the kiln to let it cool for a week, you see them turn their weary gaze to the sky. They are watching the clouds, judging the winds, reading the signs of the coming rains. They, like everyone in this empire, are utterly dependent on the one great system that governs all life here, the water. You are standing with the kiln workers, your face turned towards the brassy, unforgiving sky. The smoke from the cooling kiln has dissipated, leaving only the thick, shimmering haze of a heat that has outstayed its welcome. The air is still. Too still. The promise of rain feels like a distant memory, a myth from a wetter, more generous time. You look towards the great barre in the distance, but the familiar glint of a vast, unbroken sheet of water is gone. You see only a fractured gleam, diminished and vulnerable. The entire empire seems to be holding its breath, waiting for a relief that does not come. This is the enduring illusion of Angkor, that it was a permanent state, a kingdom whose foundations were so strong, whose command over the elements so complete, that it would stand for all time. Its intricate system of reservoirs and canals was the ultimate guarantee, a machine built to tame the heavens and conquer the chaotic cycle of nature forever. Now, you walk to the edge of that same great reservoir you saw at the beginning of our journey. The change is terrifying. The shore is no longer where it was. You have to walk 100 yards, then 200, across a desolate plain of cracked, sun-baked mud that smells of dust and decay. The sacred pool has receded into a shallow, muddy puddle in the center of its former basin. The West Mebon Temple, once an island accessible only by boat, now stands forlornly on a hillock in a sea of dirt. This is the shocking, agonizing reality of the empire's end. It did not fall to a great army in a single, climactic battle. It was slowly, relentlessly strangled by its own greatest invention. The massive, brilliant, and complex hydraulic system, the very heart of the Khmer civilization, became a brittle and fatal liability. The canals that once carried life-giving water to the rice paddies are now choked trenches of silt and weeds. The centuries, the runoff from the cleared jungle hillsides, stripped of trees to build the wooden city and fire the dragon kilns, has washed tons of soil into the system. The engineers had built a masterpiece, but it was a masterpiece that required constant, back-breaking maintenance. It needed armies of laborers to dredge the canals, to repair the dikes, to manage the sluice gates, but the empire was weakening. A series of costly wars with its neighbors, like the one you saw the army march off to, had drained its manpower. The diseases that festered in the warm waters of the barrays and the crowded conditions of the wooden city had taken their toll. And then the climate itself, the one constant the system was built to manage, betrayed them. The predictable rhythm of the monsoon began to fail. The world entered a period of climatic instability, with prolonged and severe droughts that the system was simply not designed to handle. A shallow, 5-mile-long reservoir is an evaporative disaster in a drought. The water, the empire's stored wealth, simply vanished into the hot, dry air. These devastating droughts were then punctuated by furious, unpredictable floods that overwhelmed the silted-up canals, breaking the embankments and washing away the very fields they were meant to nourish. This was not just an agricultural crisis, it was a crisis of faith. The god-king's legitimacy, his entire claim to divinity, was based on his sacred pact to control the waters and guarantee the harvest. Remember the gilded prison of his palace? His performance of divinity was the linchpin of the entire state. When the berets dried up and the rice failed, the king was no longer a god. He was just a man in a golden hat who had broken his promise. The intricate web of belief that held the empire together began to unravel. People began to abandon the city, moving south and east towards the more reliable river deltas, leaving the monumental stone temples and their failing hydraulic machine behind. The great city of Angkor, once home to 1 million souls, slowly emptied. Its ingenious inventions, from the vast barrays to the raised earthen roads, had created a top-heavy, centralized civilization that was incredibly powerful in times of stability, but terrifyingly vulnerable to systemic collapse. The heart was simply too big for the weakening body. And so, the jungle, which had been held at bay for centuries by the sheer force of human will, began its patient, inexorable return. The story does not end with a bang, but with the quiet rustle of leaves and the slow creep of vines. The sounds of the city, the roar of the crowd, the clang of the chisel, the chant of the laborers, all begin to fade into a profound and lasting silence. You are left standing among the great stone faces, their enigmatic smiles watching as the forest reclaims its own. The towers still stand, defiant against the sky, but they are becoming something new, not a living capital, but a memory, a magnificent ruin waiting to be forgotten, and then, one day, rediscovered. The air grows still and heavy, and the immense, silent weight of the past settles over the stones, a final, quiet blanket before the long sleep. And so, my dear friends, our journey through the forgotten inventions and hidden realities of the Khmer Empire comes to a gentle close. The frantic energy of the city, the heat of the kilns, the dust of the quarries, all of it can now begin to recede. Let the image of the great stone city soften in your mind. Picture the slow, patient work of the jungle as green shoots press up through the stone plazas and immense roots, like the arms of a sleeping giant, embrace the temple walls. The clamor of history fades away, replaced by the soft, ambient sounds of the forest at night, the gentle chirping of unseen creatures, the whisper of a breeze through the high canopy. There are no more illusions to shatter, no more shocking realities to uncover. There is only the quiet dignity of what remains, the testament to a people who dared to build heaven on earth, and for a time, succeeded. All that effort, all that struggle, has now earned its rest. And so have you. It's time to let go of these stories, to let them drift away like smoke from a dying fire, and to allow your own mind to find that quiet, peaceful space where dreams are born.